My uncle Rajesh slid the termination letter across the conference room table on a Tuesday morning. He had 3 other family members with him, my father's brothers, the people who had run the Meta Group for 30 years, and they had the specific collective energy of men who had made a decision and were now implementing it. My uncle said, "We think it's time for you to move on, Varun. The family has decided. You can clear your desk by Friday." I picked up the letter, I read it, I set it down. And then I said, "Before we continue, I think there's something you should know about the building we're sitting in." My uncle looked at me. "This building," I said, "has a new owner as of 3 weeks ago. The previous owner sold it through a private transaction. The new owner is—" I paused. "A holding company called VRM Properties Private Limited." Another pause. "Which I owned." The room went so quiet I could hear the air conditioning. Part 1: The MEHTA Group and the Problem with VARUN. My name is Varun Mehta, and I want to tell you about the family business before I tell you about the building, because the business is the context for everything. The Mehta Group had been founded by my grandfather in 1971, a textile trading company that had over 50 years grown into a conglomerate of moderate size with interests in textiles, light manufacturing, and real estate. The real estate had been the most recent addition, the expansion of the last decade, managed by my uncle Rajesh with the specific energy of someone who had found a new domain to be important in. The textiles were the legacy, the thing my grandfather had built and that the second generation, my father and his brothers, had maintained and grown. My father had died when I was 22. He had died suddenly, a cardiac event, the kind that restructures everything before you have had time to understand what has been restructured. He had been the youngest of the 3 brothers and the most thoughtful, and his death had shifted the family's power arrangement in ways that were invisible until they were not. I was 28 now, 6 years after my father's death. I had been working in the Meta Group since 24 in the strategy function, doing the work that I was good at: the analysis of opportunities, the assessment of risks, the specific thinking that good business decisions require. I had been good at it. The work had shown results. I had made recommendations that had been followed and that had worked, and I had made some that had been ignored and that had also worked, which was the more instructive set. My uncles had kept me because I was useful, and because not keeping me would have required a conversation with my grandmother that nobody wanted to have. They had also, slowly, made me understand that useful was not the same as included, that performing a function was not the same as belonging to the table where decisions were made. I was the problem with Varun. The problem with Varun, as I understood it from the accumulated evidence of 6 years, was specific. I was not the kind of Meta that the family picture required. Not in the way that would be named directly. My family did not name things directly. In the way that was communicated through the accumulation of exclusions and the specific language of management. You're very good at the technical side, Varun, maybe something more suited to your skills. The particular language of people who are deciding what you are allowed to be. The Tuesday termination meeting was the formal version of a conversation that had been happening for years. I had known it was coming, I had not known exactly when. I had been preparing for it since I understood it was coming, which was approximately 14 months before it arrived. The building had been part of that preparation. Part 2: The building. I want to tell you about the building with the precision that the story requires. The Meta Group's head office was in a commercial building in Connaught Place, not a building they owned, a building they leased. They had been leasing it for 12 years since the previous office had become too small. The lease was significant, the address was the address, and the Meta Group had chosen it deliberately to communicate what the family wanted communicated about itself. The lease renewal was coming up in 18 months. The building had been owned by a Punjabi businessman named Mr. Arora, who was 78 and who had been looking to rationalize his property holdings for health reasons. This information had come to me through a property lawyer I had been consulting with on personal matters, not related to the Meta Group, entirely personal. The lawyer had mentioned the building as an available opportunity, casually, in the context of a different conversation. I had sat with it for 3 days. Then I had done my homework. The building's value, the Meta Group's lease terms, the current market, the options that came with ownership. I had understood at the end of 3 days exactly what owning this building would mean. I had money, not from the Meta Group, from the investments I had been making with my own capital for 5 years, built from the savings of a strategy professional who had been paid well even if he had not been included at the table. I had been investing carefully and quietly for 5 years, in exactly the way that my professional skills had trained me to, with the patient precision of someone who understood that the long game was the right game. I had the capital for the building, not comfortably, it required all of it and a carefully structured bank facility. It was the largest financial commitment I had ever made. I had made it. VRM Properties Private Limited had purchased the building 6 weeks before the Tuesday meeting. The transaction had been private, handled through the lawyer, registered in the way that things are registered when you want them legal and accurate and not in the news. My uncles had been sitting in a building I owned when they slid the termination letter across the table. Part 3: The room after the silence. The silence lasted approximately 5 seconds. Then Rajesh said, "What?" "VRM Properties Private Limited," I said, "registered 6 weeks ago. I am the sole director. The company purchased this building from Mr. Arora through a private transaction." I paused. "I have the registration documents if you'd like to see them." Rajesh was looking at me. His brothers, my uncles Deepak and Mahesh, were looking at me. The silence had a specific texture, not the silence of people who have nothing to say, but the silence of people who are processing something that requires more than the time available. "You bought this building," Rajesh said. "Yes," I said. "With what money?" Deepak said. The specific question of someone who has assumed he knows the financial picture of a person he has known for 6 years and is discovering the assumption was wrong. "With mine," I said. "Investments I've been making for 5 years, personal capital, nothing from the Meta Group." "You didn't tell anyone," Mahesh said. "Private transaction," I said. "That's what private means." Rajesh picked up the termination letter from the table. He looked at it, he looked at me. "Varun," he said. "I'm happy to continue this conversation," I said, "but I want to be clear about the context. The Meta Group's lease on this building expires in 17 months. At that point, the lease renewal terms will be negotiated with VRM Properties." A pause. "With me." The air conditioning hummed. "You can still terminate my employment," I said. "That's a separate matter from the building ownership. The two are legally distinct. I want to be clear that I'm not conflating them." Another pause. "I just thought you should have the complete picture before we continued." I stood up. "I'll give you some time to discuss," I said. "I'll be in my office when you're ready to talk." I picked up the termination letter. I walked out of the conference room. I closed the door behind me. I walked to my office. I sat down. I looked at my computer screen. My hands were completely steady. Part 4 KARAN. Before I tell you what happened next with my uncles, I need to tell you about Karan, because Karan is the part of the story that matters more than the building. Karan Malhotra had been at the Meta Group for 2 years. He had come in as a senior analyst in the finance function. His background was chartered accountancy and corporate finance, and he had the specific precision of someone who had spent years learning to understand what numbers were actually saying rather than what they appeared to say. We had worked together on a real estate valuation project 8 months ago, one of the projects in the expansion of the real estate arm. The kind of project that required both his financial analysis and my strategic framing to produce something complete. The project had been good, the collaboration had been better. He was 32, 4 years older than me. He was someone who was precise about things that required precision and who became, when the precision was not required, someone entirely different, warmer, funnier, with opinions about things that were entirely his, and that he had arrived at through actual thinking rather than performance. He had told me once that the best thing about doing rigorous analysis for a living was that you stopped accepting things that hadn't been demonstrated. That you learned to tell the difference between what was true and what was being presented as true. "That's a useful skill outside of finance," I had said. "It's the most useful skill outside of finance," he had said. He had met my eyes when he said it. He had the specific way of meeting eyes that some people have, direct, present, not looking past you at what's next, looking at you specifically. I had filed this. Not in the management sense, in the sense of someone who has noticed something and is keeping it somewhere safe while they figure out what to do with it. He had been in the office when I walked back from the conference room on the Tuesday morning. He was at his desk, visible through the glass partition that separated his team's section from the corridor. He had looked up when I passed. He had read something in my expression, I think, because his expression had shifted slightly, the specific shift of someone who is asking a question without asking it. I had given him the smallest nod. He had nodded back. And I had gone to my office to wait for my uncles. Part 5 The conversation. Rajesh came to my office an hour later. Alone, not with his brothers. This was significant. The decision to come alone was the decision of someone who had understood that the calculation had changed and who wanted to have the real conversation without the performance that a group required. He knocked, I said, "Come in." He sat down across from my desk. He looked at his hands for a moment before looking at me. "Your father would have done this," he said. "What?" I said. "The quiet preparation," he said, "the patience, the move that nobody saw coming." He looked at me. "You are very much his son." This was not what I had expected him to say. "I thought I was the problem," I said. "You are the problem," he said. "You've always been the problem. The problem with Varun is that you think for yourself and you don't perform and you make the rest of us look like we're not paying attention." He paused, "Which we aren't." I looked at him. "The termination letter," I said. "Was a mistake," he said. "Deepak and Mahesh wanted it. I went along because it was easier than arguing." He looked at the desk. "I should have argued." "Why didn't you?" I said. "Because I've been making things easier for too long," he said. "Your father would have argued. He always argued for the right thing. I stopped doing that after he died." The office was quiet. "What do you want to do?" I said. "What do you want to do?" he said. I looked at him. "I want to work on things that matter," I said, "not be managed toward things that are safe. I want to be at the table where the decisions are made. I want to not have to hide what I am in this family to have the professional space I've earned." He received this. "All of it," he said. "All of it," I said. He nodded slowly. "The building," he said. "Is mine," I said. "That doesn't change. The lease negotiation in 17 months will happen. Fairly, I'm not interested in punishing anyone, but at market rate and on terms that reflect the actual relationship." "The actual relationship," he said. "In which I am not a function to be managed," I said. "In which I am part of this family and this business with the same standing as anyone else at the table." He was quiet for a long time. "I need to talk to Deepak and Mahesh," he said. "I know," I said. "It's going to take time," he said. "I know that too," I said. "I've been patient for 6 years." He stood up. "Your father would have been proud," he said simply. He left. I sat in my office for a long time. Part 6 KARAN and the afternoon. He found me in the break room at 4 in the afternoon. Not by accident, he had come specifically to the break room at a time when he knew I would be there, which told me he had been paying attention to my habits. He poured 2 cups of coffee without asking. He set one in front of me. He sat across the small table. "The conference room this morning," he said. "Yes," I said. "I heard something," he said. "The finance assistant told me there had been a termination meeting. I didn't know it was you until I saw you walking back." "How did you know it was a termination meeting that I had walked out of intact?" I said. "You were carrying the letter," he said, "and you nodded at me. You don't nod at people when you're the one who got fired." I looked at him. "What else did you notice?" I said. "That Rajesh Mehta went to your office an hour after you did and came out 40 minutes later looking like a man who has been reminded of something important," he said. "You observed all of that from your desk," I said. "I pay attention," he said. "To what specifically?" I said. He met my eyes. "To things that matter," he said. We looked at each other across the small break room table. The afternoon office sounds around us. 2 cups of coffee. The specific quality of a conversation that is using the professional surface to say something that is not professional. "The building," he said. "I ran the numbers on the Connaught Place property 2 weeks ago for a different analysis. The ownership transfer showed up in the registry check." He paused. "VRM Properties, I didn't know what it was." "Now you do," I said. "Now I do," he said. "Are you going to tell anyone?" I said. "Who would I tell?" he said. "Fair point," I said. "Varun," he said. "Yes," I said. 6 years, he said. "You've been here 6 years and you've been doing this for how long?" "The building specifically 6 weeks," I said. "The preparation 14 months." 14 months, he said, "alone." "Yes," I said. He looked at his coffee. "You don't have to do everything alone," he said. I looked at him. "I've been doing things alone for a long time," I said. "It's a habit." "I know," he said. "I've been watching you do it for 2 years." "Watching," I said. "Paying attention," he said again. We sat in the break room with the afternoon light coming in and the office around us doing its Tuesday things, and I understood that the conversation in the break room was the conversation I had been filing for 8 months and that it was now not filed at all. "Karen," I said. "Yes," he said. "Why do you pay attention?" I said. He met my eyes. "The same reason you nodded at me when you walked back from the conference room," he said. "Because some people matter in a specific way that the professional context doesn't fully account for." I looked at him. "8 months," I said. "About that," he said. "I've been filing something for 8 months," I said. "I know," he said, "so have I." The break room was warm and the coffee was the office coffee that is never quite right, and the afternoon was doing what Tuesday afternoons do. "The situation just became complicated," I said, "with the family and the building and the renegotiation." "Yes," he said, "I know. The professional stakes are real," I said. "They are," he said. "I'm not asking you to ignore them." "What are you asking?" I said. "To stop filing," he said. "That's it, just stop filing it." I looked at him across the small table. "Okay," I said. "Okay," he said. "Okay," I said. He almost smiled, the smile that I had been noticing for 8 months, and that was, across a break room table with office coffee, everything I had been keeping in the file. Part 7: The MONTHS After. The months after the Tuesday meeting were the months of navigating several things at once, which is the honest description of what a changed life looks like. With my uncles, the negotiation was slow and imperfect and real. Rajesh had been the honest conversation. Deepak and Mahesh had required more time, the specific time of men who have been doing things a certain way and who are now being asked to do them differently and who are not comfortable with the asking. I had been patient, I had been direct, I had refused to manage down. My grandmother had been told, not by me, she had found out through the family telegraph in the way that everything found out through the family telegraph. She had called me the evening after the Tuesday meeting and said, "Varun, I hear you bought a building." I had said yes. She had been quiet for a moment, and then she had said, "Good, just that." The specific one-word approval of a woman who had watched her family for 80 years and knew what quality looked like. At work, my role changed, not immediately and not without friction, but it changed gradually in the direction of what I had asked for at the table where decisions were made. I was present, I was included, I was not performing a smaller version of myself. The building remained mine. The lease negotiation was set for month 17. I had told Rajesh the terms I was thinking about and he had said they were fair, and I had said yes, they are, because I'm not interested in punishment. I'm interested in an honest relationship. With Karen, the months looked like this. The break room conversation had been the thing named. What came after it was the careful, attentive work of two people who have named something and are now figuring out what it requires. The professional context was real. He was in the finance function, I was in strategy, our collaboration was ongoing and important. We had been clear with each other about what the professional stakes meant and about our obligation to handle them correctly. We had handled them correctly. Which is to say, the work was the work, rigorous and honest and unaffected by what was happening outside the work. And outside the work, we had built something that was its own thing, unhurried, attentive, the specific quality of two people who had both spent time filing things and who were now not filing. He had come to my apartment for dinner in month 2. Not a dramatic occasion, just dinner, the first time we had been in a context that was entirely not the office. He had brought wine. I had cooked, which I did when I had something to think through because cooking required enough attention to quiet the other thinking. We had eaten and talked, and the conversation had done what conversations do when two people have been waiting a long time to have them. It had gone all the way down quickly. He had told me about his family. His parents in Chandigarh, the specific kind of parents who had built a picture of their son and were managing the gap between the picture and the person. He had told me about the years of navigating that gap, not dramatically, not with grievance, with the honest assessment of someone who has understood that navigating imperfectly is better than not navigating at all. I had told him about my father, about the 6 years since his death and the specific labor of being in a family that had reorganized around my absence from its picture after he died. About the building, the full version, 14 months of preparation, the specific patient certainty that the right move was the one you made when the moment was actually right. He had listened to all of it. When I finished, he had said, "Your father taught you to be patient." "He taught me that the long game was the right game," I said. "He didn't get to play it long enough." "You're playing it," he said. "Yes," I said. For him, he said. For myself, I said, and yes, for him. He had looked at me across the dinner table with the expression I had been filing for 8 months, and had stopped filing in the break room on a Tuesday afternoon. Part 8: The Complication. Here is the part that was not clean. In month 3, something happened that I had not anticipated. Deepak, my uncle, the one who had been most resistant in the negotiations after the Tuesday meeting, came to my office one afternoon. He came alone, which was unusual for Deepak, who preferred the protection of collective decision-making. He closed the door. He said, "I owe you something." I looked at him. "Not an apology," he said. "I'm not there yet, something else." "Tell me," I said. "The termination," he said. "Rajesh went along because it was easier, I pushed for it." He looked at the desk. "Not just because of the strategy function or the board position, because of what I thought you were." I was very still. "What did you think I was?" I said. "Incompatible with the Meta Group's image," he said. "That's the honest version." I looked at him. "The problem with Varun," I said. "Yes," he said. "You know," I said, "it was not a question. I've known for 2 years," he said. "Your father told me before he died." He paused. "He asked me to look after you. I did the opposite." The office was very quiet. "Why are you telling me now?" I said. "Because I've been watching you for 3 months," he said. "Since the Tuesday meeting, the way you work, the decisions you make, the way you handle the negotiation, fair, direct, without punishment." He paused. "You are exactly what this family needs, and I spent 6 years trying to remove you from it because I was afraid of what the family would think." I sat with this. "My father told you," I said. "He said, look after Varun, he'll be the one they'll try to make small, don't let them." He looked at his hands. "I let them, I was one of them." "What do you want from me?" I said. "Nothing," he said. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, I'm giving you information you deserved 6 years ago. Your father knew who you were and was proud of it and wanted you to know that was true." I looked at the wall of my office. "Did anyone else know," I said, "that he told you?" "No," he said, "just me." He stood up. "The negotiation," he said. "Mahesh and I will agree to your terms, the honest terms. We should have been doing business with you honestly from the beginning." He left. I sat in my office for a long time after he left, not doing anything, just sitting with what had been said and what it meant and what my father had asked for and what had and hadn't been delivered. I called Karan that evening. He picked up on the first ring. "Tell me," he said, before I said anything, "the specific responsiveness of someone who has been paying the kind of attention that makes them ready." I told him about Deepak, the full version. He listened. When I finished, he said, "Your father knew." "He told Deepak," I said. "He asked him to look after me." "He knew," Karan said again, more softly. I was quiet. "He died before I started." "He knew," Karan said. "Whatever he knew about you, he was proud of it." "Deepak said that, your father said that." I looked at the ceiling. "I've spent 6 years not knowing if he would have." I stopped. "He knew and he was proud," Karan said. "That's what you have now, that's what Deepak gave you." I sat with it. "Karan," I said. "Yes," I said. "Come over," I said. "I'm already in the car," he said. Part 9: The Distance. I want to tell you about the period in month 4 when things went wrong between us, because the story deserves the full version. Karan was offered a position, a significant one, head of corporate finance at a company in Mumbai, a step up that was real and substantial, and that represented the kind of opportunity that came once in a certain period of a career. He told me about it on a Thursday evening. He had been sitting with it for a week before telling me, he said, because he needed to think about it before saying it out loud. I listened to everything he said: the position, the company, the scope, the Mumbai relocation. I said, "You should take it." He looked at me. "That's what you want to say," he said. "It's a real opportunity," I said, "the kind that doesn't wait." "Varun," he said. "What?" I said. "I'm not asking your permission," he said. "I'm telling you because I want to make a decision with you, not around you." I looked at him. "We're 3 months in," I said. "I'm not going to be the reason you don't take a position like this." "I didn't say you were the reason," he said. "I'm being practical," I said. "You're being the back table," he said. I stopped. "What?" I said. You're putting yourself at the back table, he said. You're deciding before I have a chance to say it that you're not the kind of thing someone arranges their decisions around. I looked at him. That's different from the building, he said. The building was you refusing to be made small by your uncles. This is you making yourself small before I have a chance to say what I actually think. I was quiet for a moment. What do you actually think? I said. I think I don't want to go to Mumbai, he said. I think what I'm building here, the work and the other thing, is the right thing. I think the Mumbai position is an excellent position that I am going to decline. Because of me, I said. Among other reasons, he said. Yes, because of you specifically, and because the Delhi work is the right work for me right now, and because I do not make major decisions without accounting for all the relevant variables. He looked at me. You are a relevant variable. I looked at him. I've been alone for a long time, I said. I'm not used to being a variable. I know, he said, but you are one, get used to it. I looked at him across my kitchen table and understood that he was right and that I had been doing the thing that Siddharth had told Rohan in the other story, pre-managing myself down before he had the chance to do otherwise. I'm sorry, I said. Don't apologize, he said, just don't do it again. Okay, I said. Okay, he said. He stayed for dinner. He turned down the Mumbai position the following week. Part 10. My grandmother. She called me on a Sunday morning in month 5. My grandmother, Kamla Devi Mehta, was 82 years old and had the specific authority of a woman who had built a family for 60 years and who understood everything about it even when she said she didn't. She called and said, "Come for lunch." I went. The house was the house I had grown up visiting, the big house in Lajpat Nagar that the family still used for gatherings, full of the specific layered accumulation of a family home that has been occupied for decades. She was in the sitting room when I arrived, in her chair by the window, with the expression she wore when she had things to say and had organized them. We ate lunch. After lunch, she said, "Sit." I sat. The building, she said. Yes, I said. You bought it with your own money, she said. Yes, I said. Without telling anyone, she said. Private transaction, I said. She almost smiled, like your father. Everyone keeps saying that, I said. Because it's true, she said. He did things quietly and completely and he didn't need anyone to applaud him while he was doing them. She looked at me. You are very much his son. I know, I said. Deepak told you, she said. I looked at her. You knew he was going to tell me, I said. I suggested he should, she said, simply. He needed to say it and you needed to hear it. I sat with this. How long have you known, I said, about everything, the thing about me, the thing my father had known, all of it? I'm 82, she said. I have known everything about everyone in this family for a very long time. I looked at my grandmother. Did you want to say something about it? I said, any of it. She looked at me with the specific expression of a woman who has thought carefully about something for a long time. I want to say that I have been proud of you since you were a child, she said, for the thinking and the patience and the way you see things clearly. I want to say that your grandfather loved you more than he knew how to express and that he would have been proud of the building and the strategy and all of it. And I want to say, she paused, the young man. I was very still. Karen, I said. I don't know his name, she said. I know there is a young man, your mother mentioned it, carefully, the way your mother mentions things when she is trying to say them without saying them. My mother knows, I said. Your mother has known since you were 19, she said. She told me last year. I looked at the ceiling briefly. Nanny, I said. I have known everything about everyone for a very long time, she said again. I want to say, bring him to lunch. I looked at her. Here, I said. Where else, she said. I'm 82, I'm not going to restaurants. I almost laughed. What about Deepak and Mahesh, I said. Deepak owes you a great deal, she said. Mahesh follows whoever is loudest. I am the loudest person in this family. She looked at me. Bring the young man to lunch. Part 11. The lunch. Karen came to lunch on a Sunday in month 6. He was, I will say, nervous in the way of someone who had prepared to be unnerved and was finding that the preparation had not fully worked. My grandmother had this effect on people, the specific effect of someone who pays attention completely, in whose presence performing something was visibly pointless. She had asked him questions, not the formal questions, the real ones, about his work, what he was trying to do with it, what he thought about things. He had answered honestly, which was the only available option in her presence. She had asked about his family. He had told her about Chandigarh and the gap between the picture his parents had and the person he was. She had listened to this with the expression she wore when she was filing something real. At one point she had said, "Do they know?" He had said, "Not fully." She had said, "They will eventually, these things find their way." He had said, "I know." She had looked at him for a moment. "You're good at analysis," she had said. "Yes," he had said. "You should apply it to the family situation," she had said. "The risk of not telling is higher than the risk of telling, the data supports it." He had almost laughed. "Yes," he had said, "the data does support it." "Then act on the data," she had said. After lunch, when he had gone to get the car, she had taken my hand briefly and said, "He's good." "I know," I said. "He sees you clearly," she said. "That's the rare thing." "Yes," I said. "Keep him," she said. "Nanny," I said. "I'm 82, she said. "I don't have time for indirect." Part 12: The Building and What It Became. 8 months after the Tuesday meeting. I want to tell you what the building meant at the end of 8 months, because the meaning is the whole point. The building was mine. The Meta Group was going to renew its lease at market rate in an honest relationship negotiated between adults who had stopped pretending that the relationship was something other than what it was. My uncle Rajesh had signed the framework agreement. Deepak had signed it. Mahesh had signed it. The signing had been quiet and practical and without ceremony, which was exactly right. My role at the Meta Group was different, not transformed, changed in the direction I had asked for. I was at the table, not by grace, by right, which is the right reason to be anywhere. I was making decisions that mattered. I was the Varun Mehta that my father had apparently been telling people about since before I understood who I was. My grandmother had Karen to lunch 3 more times in those 8 months. He had become, gradually and without drama, the person who sat across from her and argued with her about things, and whom she argued back at with the pleasure of someone who had found a worthy interlocutor. She had said to me after the third lunch, "He argues well." "Yes," I had said. "Like you," she had said. "Better," I had said. She had looked at me with the expression she wore when she approved of something. Karen's parents came to Delhi in month 7. This had been his decision, made with the specific patient certainty of someone who had analyzed the data and acted on it. The visit had been difficult and honest and ongoing, not resolved but started. His parents had met me briefly at dinner, the kind of meeting that is not the full version but is the beginning of the full version. His father had said, looking at me across the table, "You work in business." "Yes," I had said. "What kind?" he had said. "I own a building," I had said. Karen had looked at me with the expression he wore when he thought I had done something exactly right. My father had told Deepak to look after me. Deepak had failed that instruction for 6 years and had come to my office in month 3 and said so. My father had known who I was and had been proud. I had not known that he knew. I had spent 6 years not knowing. I know now. The building I own is the building where my uncles tried to fire me on a Tuesday morning. The air conditioning still hums. The conference room table is the same table. The room is a different room. I built this with my own capital and 14 months of patient work and the specific belief that the long game was the right game and that the right moment to move is when the moment is actually right. My father would have done this. I am very much his son. And the person who said you don't have to do everything alone in a break room on a Tuesday afternoon is here on a Sunday morning at the table in my apartment, arguing with me about a finance model with the specific pleasure of someone who is doing the thing they are best at with the person they want to be doing it with. I stopped filing 8 months ago. I am at the table. Not the back table. The right one. Clapperboard final hook. My uncle slid a termination letter across the table on a Tuesday morning. I picked it up, I read it, I set it down. And then I told them whose building they were sitting in. The air conditioning hummed. Rajesh said, "How much?" I said, "I own it." And then I told them what I wanted, not punishment, the real relationship, the table I had earned, the honest arrangement. They agreed. Because the right move made at the right moment, with the patience that my father had taught me and the preparation that 14 months of quiet work had built, the right move changes rooms. My grandmother had Karen to lunch and said he argues well. She said keep him. She is 82 and does not have time for indirect. He turned down Mumbai. He said you are a relevant variable, get used to it. I am getting used to it. My father told Deepak to look after me and said he was proud. I know now. The building is mine. The table is mine. The work is real. And on Sunday mornings in my apartment, someone who has been paying attention for 2 years argues with me about finance models with the specific pleasure of being exactly where they chose to be. He chose. So did I. That is what the building really bought. If this story found something you needed, if someone tried to make you small and you had already built something they didn't know about like it, share it with someone who is still preparing quietly and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, what have you been building quietly while someone thought they knew your ceiling? And one last question. Month 9, the lease negotiation is formal and final. My uncles and I are at the table, the real ones, signing the agreement that makes the relationship honest. And at the end of the meeting, Deepak says something to me, not about business, something personal, something that gives me the last piece of what my father actually said to him. Should I tell you what Deepak said? Part 2 is coming, eyes. Subscribe, you will not want to miss it. The Revenge Chronicles.